Hello, this is the example for Learning Plan 3 that we're going to go over. We're just going to do one example for this learning plan because all of the case studies are just about the same except with some different numbers in them. So one to go over is sufficient for our purposes this time. So what we are working with is the Schedule F. This is what we're learning about, and we can look here and I'll explain how this is set up. So the Schedule F is to show the profit or loss from a farming operation. This is just one form inside of the individual tax return. So this is just showing all of our income and all of our expenses from the farm, and then we will see if there's a net profit at the end or a net loss. And then that amount will go onto our page 1 of our Form 1040, which is our individual tax return. We'll get to that later on in the learning plans, but for right now we're just only focusing on the Schedule F here. So we have the name of the farm, or the name of the proprietor, so the name of the farmer, because usually farms don't have names. Then we have the Social Security number, the principal crop or activity. This is mainly to specify what the main or principal activity of the farm is, whether it's to do crops, what kind of crops, to raise livestock, that type of information. And then this code directly relates to that activity. We aren't going to worry about that because the codes can sometimes be a little bit particular and it really isn't necessary for what we're learning. The next part is the accounting method, whether we are operating under cash or accrual. About 99% of the time, the accounting method is cash, so we really don't have to worry about that either. And all of our case studies will be cash. Then the next line is for the farm employer ID number. So some of them may have this, some of them may not. In our case studies, they will have this, so we'll enter that. The next line is to ask, did the farmer materially participate in the operation of the business? So in order to be considered a business, they have to materially participate. Most of your farmers are going to do that. That's not going to be an issue. So then our next question is, did you make any payments that would require you to file Form 1099? So this is if you are paying large amounts to different types of like custom hire, anything like that. For our purposes, we're not going to worry about that. And then we move on down to the income section. So this is going to list all of our different types of income that can be taxable. The majority of them are, and some of them are not. And then we move further down to the farm expenses. So this lists a good majority of what type of expenses you'll see. It lists them out separately, such as chemicals, feed, gasoline, rent for like machinery, repairs and maintenance. And then there's this spot right here for other expenses. So if there is an expense that doesn't fall within one of these categories, you would just list it here and then put the amount here. For our purposes, we are not going to have any of these other expenses, but that's where it would go. An example of one of these other expenses would be if there was office supplies for, like if the farmer had employees that they needed to buy payroll checks for. Those office supplies would go in this other expenses category. So then at the end of the page, it's going to total the expenses and then show the net farm profit or loss, which is obviously your income less your expenses. These couple of boxes down here we're not really going to worry about for our case studies. It's asking if there was any subsidies received and if the investment is at risk. At risk we will talk about in Learning Plan 4 when we have a farm rental. And then the second page is if the farmer operates under the accrual method of accounting, and we are not going to have to worry about this because we are not operating under the accrual method. There's just a little bit different way you calculate your income that way. So if we do that, go back up to the top of the page, we have an example here in the Microsoft Excel, which I will put on the blackboard as well. We have Alex Anderson, who owns a farm, materially participated in 2015, operates on a cash basis, made no payments to require filing of 1099s, and no assets were sold or purchased. It lists his social security number, his farm federal ID number, and then it shows us his income. He has the majority of income from steer sales, but he also has some straw sales and he has some taxable co-op distributions. The fact that it is listed as taxable co-op distributions means that when we look at the farm income here, we have an amount for co-op distributions total, and then we have what the taxable amount is. So not all of your co-op distributions are going to be taxable, but for our purposes for this case study, for this example, they are. Then we have our expenses listed out. We have the cost of the steers, feed, taxes, gas and oil, equipment rental, custom hire, wages paid, chemicals, vet expenses, fertilizer, and seed. So what we're going to do then is enter everything on form or Schedule F. So we have the name of the proprietor is Alex Anderson. His social security number is 123456789. Not very creative there. His principal crop or activity is going to be steer sales. We're not going to worry about entering this code. The accounting method is cash. His farm federal ID number is 987654321. Again, not very creative, but it works. Our next question is, did you materially participate in the operation? We know that he did, so we checked the yes box. And then the next question is, did you make any payments in 2015 that would require you to file Forms 1099? And our answer is no, so we can check that. And we only have to answer line G if we checked yes in line F. So because we checked no, we can skip that. Then we move down to our farm income. So it is saying that we have steer sales of $75,814. So that goes under our sales of livestock and other resale items. So we put 75,814, and we don't really have to worry about the cents because we don't use cents when we're calculating forms like this. So then we have straw sales. So that would be sales of livestock, produce, grains, or other products that you raised. So we have 17,081. And then we have our taxable co-op distributions. So we know that our total co-op distributions are $942. And then we also know that our taxable co-op distributions are again $942. So that totals our income, but the one thing we have to note is if we look back up here at our sales of livestock and other resale items, we have our income of $75,814, but we also have this next line that says cost or other basis of livestock or other items reported. So when we look at our expenses, we see our cost of steers. So that amount, instead of going down in our expenses down here, it has to go up in our income, so it gets netted with the income of the $75,000 right away. So our cost of steers is $25,600. So what we need to do then is we need to net these two together right away. And that leaves us with 50,214. So then when we add these together, we would get, bear with me just a minute. We take 50,214 plus 17,081 plus 942, and we get 68,237. So 68,237. So that's our gross income. Then we move down to our expenses section. So our first expense listed was our cost of steers, but we already have that included up here, so we don't need to include that anywhere down here. So then we move on. Our next expense is feed. So we have $14,098 for feed. Our next expense is for taxes, which would be for probably payroll taxes because we do have wages paid. So we have $2,507. Next expense is gas and oil is $88.76. Equipment rent. So when you look at the rent, there's going to be a line for vehicle rent, machinery rent, or equipment rent, and then other rent. So this would be land rent, or if there was animals that were rented. For equipment rent, we put it on line, the first line, so $2,500. We have custom hire or machine work that was done for us for $32.05. We have wages paid, which that will go down here where it says labor hired. So there's no wages line, but there's a labor hired line. So our wages are $10,950. Our chemicals are $59.63. Our vet expenses are $750. Our fertilizer is $13,091. And our seed is $3,810. So that takes care of all the expenses. So now what we need to do is we need to total them. So if we go back to our calculator and clear that out, we have $59.63 plus $32.05, $14,098, $13,091, $88.76, $10,950 plus $2,500, $38.10, $25.07, and $750. Gives us $65,750 for total expenses, $65,750. So then our next line is to calculate our net farm profit or loss. So we take our $68,327 of gross income less our $65,750, and we get $25.77 for our net farm profit. And that is how we fill out the Schedule F. Pretty simple, just a matter of making sure that the income and the expenses go in the right line. There's a lot of information up in the income section that you're probably not going to deal with, especially in these case studies. But the main ones that you're going to be concerned with are line 1 and line 2. That's where your main income is going to come from. And then again, on the farm expenses, usually you're not going to have to worry about any of these other expenses, and pretty much anything will fall within the expenses listed. If there are any questions, let me know. Otherwise, we will see you all Friday.